Quentin, if there is any question that has haunted me my entire life, it is why not nothing? Why is there something rather than nothing? Is it even possible to make progress in answering this question?
I think so. The first thing is to recognize that when people have tried to answer it, they have defined nothing as this very thin sort of something, like empty space, quantum vacuum. Someone called it the null set, and someone called it a point. But no one has really talked about nothing. They talked about just some tiny little bit of something. So
but this is really nothing. Absolutely nothing forever. Not even the concept of nothing.
Okay. And I think a good way to describe it as not something. So the question is, why is it the case that it is false that there is not something?
Well said.
Okay. Now, there is an answer to that, but it's very trite and trivial. Whereas we've all associated that question as having some great, grand, magnificent, metaphysical answer, but the answer is just logically trivial and really quite uninteresting. The answer would be this. Right now, this is a state of the universe. It is something. So why does this something exist? Well, it was caused to exist by the previous state of the universe, which is also something, and now it's caused by a previous state, which in turn is something. And so the reason why there is something is that each state, each something that exists has been caused by another something. And as you asked why there is something at all, I can say, well, I can just confine myself to one example. This state of the universe. And then the answer is a previous state of the universe caused it to exist.
Well, you use the word example, and you're right. We have one data point. But there's no reason why this whole package, this sequence of states, had to exist rather than not this.
I think there's two questions here we need to distinguish. One is that there might have been something else, but that's a different question than asking what's the reason why this something, this universe exists.
Well, there's an even earlier question, which is there might have been not anything.
Right.
There might have been not anything, and then if there is something, which we are the something, the place where we reside, there might have been something that's not this something. That's a second question. But the first question is, well, why is there anything at all?
Well, the answer...
It would seem to be more simple, more logical, and less to explain if there really were nothing, not something.
I'm not sure simple and less to explain makes sense. You're talking about not something. I mean, that's kind of questions that are asked when people are defining nothing as this very thin type of something. But I think what makes the answer difficult is that the answer is so obvious and trivial, and we're so used to expecting it to be a grand answer. But it's really trivial.
I don't mean this to be insulting, but your answer is not very satisfying.
Well, I found that insulting.
But do you find your own answer satisfying?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, although...
You look pretty content.
Well, it took me a while to recover from the disappointment after I first realized that's the answer. And I said, I spent all my life wondering why there's something or nothing, and this is the answer.
But does your answer then, is it founded on the fact that there could never have been any other way? It is impossible for it to have been the case that this condition we are has not always existed. Is that an impossibility?
It is possible that there is not something, but it is actual that there is something.
Okay, that's good. I think we've made a little progress here. It is certainly actual that there is something, but you now say it is possible that it could have been the case that there could have been not something. So now, between those two possibilities, how do we distinguish? What is the selecting process that determined one or the other?
Well, the selecting process, that's a little bit vague expression. I would answer it in this way. There is something. This state of the universe right now is something.
Yes.
So why is there something rather than nothing? Well, this state of the universe was caused by a previous state. Then you ask, well, why was that? That's something also. Why does that exist? It was caused by an earlier state. Then if you ask, well, why do all the states that you might call something exist? Well, each of them was caused by an earlier state. And why isn't there nothing? Because it happened that something is caused to exist by an earlier something.
Would you call that a brute fact that what you've said is the end of the explanation, and even though it is not wholly satisfying, that's as good as you're going to get?
I would not call it a brute fact. I would say it's a more logically complete explanation than either theism or any other theory has given, because there are no questions left unanswered in that explanation.
However unsatisfying the answer may be.
But the lack of satisfaction is due to thousands of years of habit that the answer to the question, why is there something rather than nothing, must be magnificent and shocking and
I would certainly agree that satisfaction has nothing to do with reality. And people who try to do that, I think, are conflating two completely different kinds of categories of things. So the fact that I am unsatisfied with your answer bears no influence on whether your answer is correct.
Okay, I'd say the reason you're unsatisfied, as I was when I first thought this, is that I assumed what everyone else said unquestioningly assumed, that the answer must be terribly profound and life-changing and like the ultimate in wisdom. And then when I find out it's the ultimate in triviality, I wasn't satisfied, but it was followed logically. It was logically valid, logically sound deduction. So I had to accept it. So I had to accept that what we thought were our profoundest questions are really not profound. They're logically trite. And this is very different from the old logical positivist tradition. Their idea was, if you can't observe something, it's meaningless. Well, I think they're wrong. If you can't observe something, it can still exist and it's still meaningful. I'm just saying that the answer is not interesting because it's so logically inconsequential in the sense of unimportant. I mean, it is a deductive argument, and it's trivial, but it's sound but disappointing. So now the question is, where are we going to look for our profound questions? If why is there something, not nothing, a profound question? What are the profound questions?
What you're saying is there are none.
No. I would say the profound questions are, what are the felt meanings of the world? No, that just happened to be the title of one of my books. So that was pure coincidence. But I think there are different ways to conceive of meaning. Like, why is there something rather than nothing is looking for a reason, an explanation. And I say, well, the profound questions don't ask about reasons or explanations, but they ask about what is most important or what has the greatest felt meaning. And those are not reasons. And so I would claim that those are the profoundest questions, and they're quite different from the traditional
Very
questions.
different, and they're basically psychological questions. They're not fundamentals of reality questions.
No, because a major project of giving that answer, I mean, the book was devoted to showing that these intrinsic importance of the universe was not projected onto it by humans, and is not individually relative or subjective. Because if they are subjective and individually relative, then they aren't interesting at all. I mean, so the main point is to try and show that they are intrinsic to the universe, but also they're not moral values. So it's not saying there's moral realism is true. There's a sense of importance which you can define, in which everything is important in some way. Then the question is, well, what is the greatest importance? And I would say the greatest importance is the world as a whole.
But if we're only dealing with a cause that causes a cause in some infinite sequence, why is any of it of any importance?
An importance would be defined as whatever would elicit an emotional reaction that appreciates it as important if some sentient or intelligent being became aware of it. And when someone's not aware of it, it has this disposition that would be actualized of not causing or eliciting an emotional response to any being if they were aware of it, and they would recognize the base of that disposition to elicit this emotional reaction. And that base is what is important.
So what you're saying is, in reality, there's this potential to elicit the feeling of importance in sentient beings, if sentient beings ever exist or evolve.
I'm saying more than that this potentiality is grounded, this potentiality is possessed by, there's a technical term, a base of disposition, something that is actual and something that is you're aware of when you're having an effective response, because you're not aware of something evoking a feeling response in you. You're aware of what it is that evokes a feeling response. And that's the actual basis of this disposition to bring about the feeling. And that basis is something that is important in itself. And so I'm suggesting that this idea that explanations and reasons for the universe, they're not the meanings of the world that are really interesting. And the meanings that are interesting are, the question is, in what ways is the world intrinsically important? And in what way is the world most important? Well, of course, the key thing is you have to show that these are intrinsic to the world, because feelings have always been misconceived as been projected onto the world. And I argue that's not true.